I mentioned earlier that these have 3D panning on, but in fact they're all going through this speaker, so which means you can like position this somewhere else, and even though these have a position of over here, I can't hear them. I have to go towards the speaker position. So that's actually set in here, enter speaker name. So by default this isn't named, and this gadget isn't named, because speaker is just the default what it shows when it's not named. So it uses that speaker. Also, because it's in the chip, it kind of just absorbs anything in that chip. But then if you give this speaker a name and see, where is it? So there. So they're not going into this anymore because it's not going to the speaker name A. So if you use up and down on here, or you just type in there, now that gadget is using this speaker. So the way they actually had it set up, if I just press triangle on that gizmo, then it goes back to the default position. And this was actually surface snapped onto this bit of wood. So earlier we talked about this apply to object. If you surface snap it to an object, then it gets that apply to object added anyway. But because it's surface snapped, then it moves with the plank of wood. So the sound effects are always like next to that piece of wood. Yeah, if you're facing the position of the location, then it will go normal volume. But if you look away, then it's really quiet or just inaudible, depending on if you've got surround sound set up or not. And if you look at it like that, it's coming from the left speaker because it's on the left, and the right speaker, which is because it's on the right. This is because it has that 3D panning, auto 3D panning, which is the same, that speaker has auto 3D panning. So you could turn it off for the speaker, and now all those sounds would just come out of both speakers as normal. So to fix that, if that's a problem, then you can go to the normal panning tab and change the rear speaker's volume. So now if I look away, I can still hear it, and if I put it 100%, it won't make any difference if I'm facing it or I'm looking away from it. It'll still be the same volume, or you can like have it just a little bit quieter, but normally it's quite low, which means you could barely hear it at all. So that's the setting that you want. Lastly, there's this sound effects volume, and it actually goes from 0 to negatives. That's because it's controlling not like the actual volume of something, but the change in volume in the microchip tweak menu. So if I remove that, then if we turn that down, that's subtracting from all the volume of anything in that chip. And if we turn it up, it's adding to the volume of anything in that chip. So then, because this is plugged in, if you send it a negative, then it's subtracting from the volume. So you could, if you wanted to, make it go higher, but you'll start getting like clipping and stuff from the sound effects, I think. But then you could have the full range of volume for the sound effects. This chip over here, if we put it away, then you can see this special wire coming from apply to object, and that's linking to this object here, which means all of the gadgets in here by default will apply to that object. So we have this movement sensor, and that's applying to that object, so it's detecting if this is moving. Yeah, so Y is pointing up, so it's using the speed of Y moving up or down. Then it's using this splitter, so if you have any value, you can actually split it. Normally a splitter is used to, if you have a fat wire that contains like an entire position or something, then you can use a splitter to get different aspects, different values that's contained within that fat wire. But you can also use splitters on a normal value, and it will give you a positive and a negative. So when it's positive, then it's just routed straight through there. When it's negative, this stays 0. and when it's negative, it's flipped into positive again, so minus 0.7 becomes 0.7, and then when there's no negative, then this stays at 0. So it's like, how positive is it and how negative is it? And that's what we're doing with this y velocity moving up and down. So how fast are we moving up, and this will be how fast are we moving down. So then these signal manipulators just smooth it out a bit, because we don't want our audio to suddenly cut in. We want it to just fade in over 0.1 seconds and fade out as well, using these sliders here, smooth rise and smooth fall. So it kind of fades in all of this stuff. So one thing that's important to know is, if I just put that out in the world, if we put that at full blast, it's fairly loud. Now if we use a value slider to go into the power, then if we give it just 0.1 power, it's playing, but it's just very quiet. So this actually kind of multiplies the volume, and it's affecting how loud it actually plays at. Which means in this chip, then these signal manipulators slowly powering up means that these sound effects are slowly, the volume is slowly coming in, but also this effect field. So what does this effect field do? This effect field just adds, makes these a bit faster, makes the pitch a bit higher, and affects the EQ. So it doesn't do too much. So theoretically you could just go in here and make those same changes, because all an effect field does is affect the settings of sounds that try to play. So what you could do, because they're all being powered by the same value, I was going to say you could put them in a chip, because normally if you want a load of gadgets to be powered at the same time, you could just put them all into one chip and it'll be fine. In this case though, we want to not just power these on or off, because because a microchip doesn't really care about how much power it's receiving, as long as it's positive, then it will just be full power. So if we had a switch actually outputs a value. So if we get a number displayer, I'm going to put it over here for reasons. Wire in there, show decimal places. So it's actually sending a 1, and you can affect what values it's sending in here. So when it's off, it's sending a different value to when it's on. That's about all that a switch does. But now let's say we want, if we set that back to default, it's sending a 1. We can actually control how much of the output signals it's sending by powering it to different degrees. So if we power it full blast, then it's sending a 1. If we power it at 0, it's sending a 0. If we power it somewhere in between, it's actually multiplying whatever the output is by the power that the gadget has. So if we're giving it 0.4 power, then when it tries to send a 1, it's actually sending a 0.4. And if we set it to 2, then it's 2 times 0.4, which is the power, so it's sending 0.8. But if you want to apply that to the whole chip, the chip's power doesn't seem to affect the gadgets inside it, so this doesn't really do anything. If it's 0 or non-positive, if it's non-positive, then it's powered off. If it's positive, it's powered on, and that's it. So that's why in here they've actually got wires going to every gadget, so that the actual half power or whatever going into these gadgets does have make a difference. But I don't think we need those nodes. We can just wire them in. And a little trick is, while you're holding a wire and then you place it, if you hold L1 while placing it like that, then it will make a new wire coming from the same place. So then you can wire the same place into multiple other places more easily. But then if you have a sound gadget or something that can open, like a chip, then if you do that, then it goes L1 and X, and it's like, oh, you want to open it then. So you want to, you'll have to just do it manually, or you can actually clone a wire with L1 and R2, like that, to copy it across. So that's the little starting moving up, that's stopping at the top, sound when it starts moving down, sound when it stops moving down. Yeah, so the way this is done is using signal manipulators. So here, it's waiting for it to get to 0.01, which means it started moving up. So I'll just give you an idea of what values this is actually putting out. Plugging that in there. So this is from the signal generator over there, which is moving it up and down, and it's got a value from 0 to 1, and then 1 to 0, and it kind of pauses at the top and bottom and things. When it gets to that 0.01, it outputs 1, which tells it that it's at that value or greater, basically. But then down here it has the edge mode pulse set on, which means when the input gets to the maximum, which is 0.01, it sends a pulse of this value, which is 1. And apart from that, it just sends a 0. So then when you play, it has that little flicker just after it starts moving up, like that. And then the next one down is waiting until it's right near the top, 0.97, and then pulsing on. So if you watch for when it gets to the top, then it sends a pulse just at that point. Now these work similarly, but kind of the other way around. So this has a minimum input of 0.98, and when it gets to that, then it wants to send the minimum value, but then it has pulse sat off, which means when it gets to this minimum value, then it sends the maximum output, which is 1 for 1 frame, and then 0 for the rest of the time, which is the same as a normal pulse. If we actually look at what's going on in here, so the value goes up, and when it goes from above that number to the minimum number, then it does the pulse. So it doesn't pulse when it gets to it first time, but when it comes down to that threshold, it sends that pulse. And same here, when it gets right near the bottom, from being above that number to being at or below that number, if you look at whether that's playing or not, it's not playing at the start. So when that value comes down and gets near the bottom, then that one's playing. And then all these sound effects are on once mode, which means they'll just play all the way through when it gets triggered to power on from these pulses. So when it starts moving up, it'll play that through the whole way. When it's reached the top, then it will play that through the whole way, and so on. So now you can hear the first one, and then this gets triggered when it gets to the top. This gets triggered when it starts moving down. This gets triggered when it reaches the bottom. I'd like to thank Evil Key Mal, Creator4983, White Beardy, and all of my other supporters for making this tutorial possible. Check out TAPgiles.com to find out how you can support me in helping Dreams creators. Thanks for your consideration, and I'll see you in the next one.